On February 9th, 2019, at UFC 234, Kelvin Gastelum and Robert Whittaker will be fighting for the middleweight title in the main event of the evening. This is a fight that on paper it would seem fairly close, actually, if you think about it. Both of them are pretty solid strikers with knockout power on the feet. Kelvin I believe he may have wrestled in college, but I know he was a state placer in high school. Robert Whittaker made the Pan American team for Australia for wrestling, and then they're both brown belts in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. But if you look at the odds, it actually isn't as close as that would make it sound. Robert Whittaker is a considerable favorite at minus 227, with Kelvin Gastelum coming back at plus 200 as an underdog. To me, one of the more interesting storylines in this, in addition to just kind of how they're going to match up, which I'll get into based off of some of their more recent fights, is after the last fight that Whittaker had against Yoel Romero. It was a 5-round fight, took a lot of damage, got rocked a couple times, was fighting with a broken hand for about 4.5 rounds. It's one of those fights where you can almost be certain that he's not going to be the same fighter coming out of it that he is. He won't be the same fighter at UFC 234 that he was at UFC 225. The question is, how much diminished will it be? Will it be just a very small marginal amount that isn't going to make a difference, or is it going to be something noticeable where the Whittaker we see is significantly different and he can't take a shot quite as well? It's hard for me to speculate on that. I really have no idea. The fact that he's taking a fight right now in February and that last fight was in June, he didn't take a full year off. That indicates to me that he probably didn't need to take the full year off. He wasn't rushing himself back. Normally, he isn't one to rush himself back into fights. He hasn't been the most active champion. So it seems like from that indication, he's probably doing okay. And he's probably doing just fine for someone his age who's been fighting as long as he has. But now to get into how I think this fight's going to go, I think this fight's primarily going to take place standing up. That's really no surprise. I think most people feel the same way. I was watching their more recent fights and looking at how they stand up. Kelvin, in particular, likes to counter a lot. Both fighters keep their hands down quite a bit and rely on head movement to avoid getting hit. So for Kelvin, a lot of times he likes to slip and then kind of counter off the slip or use that more as like a pull counter. Whereas Robert Whittaker likes to stay on the outside. He'll be the one who will engage with you first. He'll kind of throw out the jab or throw out some kicks just to stay active. But when he comes in and looks to throw extended combinations, if you throw at him, he'll try to duck out of the way or use some head movement to get out of the way, as opposed to blocking with his hand that's up in a defensive posture. So if you look at how Kelvin Gastelum got the knockout of Michael Bisping, what's really interesting here is that it actually is 3 straight sequences that go the same way. The first 2 he doesn't fire off, and the third one he fires off and gets the knockout. So I have this actually put down in slow motion so you can see what happens here. So he's waiting for Bisping to kind of throw the left and then come across with a cross. What he's really trying to counter here is that cross from Bisping. And Bisping's an orthodox fighter, as is Robert Whittaker here. Although Whittaker doesn't use the cross quite as much as Bisping. So feints with the hook. All right, now watch the reaction right there. So what you can see is that with this left hand, he's actually looking for lead hook, and he had the right hand was the lead hook, and then he'd be following that up with a cross. So he kind of circles that lead hand looking for the hook, but Bisping gets out of range just in time. That's the first time. Second time's coming up. So he gets his head back. You're gonna see the lead hand circle a little bit, look, because he was looking for the 3-2 counter. Nothing there. Still coming forward, still waiting for Bisping to throw that cross so he can counter it. There it is. There's the cross, the lead hook. And then the 2. And that cross puts him out. So I'll go back to that really slow again. Looks for the hook, doesn't get it. Kind of leans back, doesn't get it quite there. And then for the knockout punch here. They throw straight in. Counters Bisping, throwing right back. Heads out of the way, looking to pull back in. You're going to see this hook come in first. And then the cross come in second. Hook, cross. And that's big for Kelvin. And I'd imagine that in this fight too, Kelvin's going to be looking to kind of employ a similar strategy where he's going to be looking to pick apart on whether it's the cross from Whittaker or whether he's looking for something else. A lot of his offense comes off of countering. A lot of it comes off of being able to either pull or slip or get some kind of head movement and then countering off. So while they're trying to come back, that's when you come in with your shot. So if you look at how Robert Whittaker fought against Yoel Romero in certain ways is similar in that he's a guy who you have to be worried about a one-punch knockout. So Whittaker had to fight fairly cautious with him. I think he's going to have to fight pretty cautious with Gastelum. Now, granted, Romero primarily fights out of orthodox. Gastelum fights out of southpaw. Romero will throw a lot more kicks than Gastelum will. But early on in the fight, one thing I noticed is that Whittaker was pretty much just throwing single shots here. So he'd throw one kick, try to keep it safe. But again, you notice the hands are always down. Throw one jab, try to stay safe. Again, really tight. If Romero comes in, he's going to try to move his head and get out of the way that way. So actually gets the block there, throws a kick, a single shot. And a lot of what I saw from him in this fight is that he would mostly just throw a single shot from the outside. And if you came in, he'd probably throw a single shot and then try to get out of the way. But when he'd really start to string his combinations together is when he would throw a shot and then come in on you, and then he would notice you're backing up and you're not trying to counter him. So you'd throw a shot, you kind of back straight out of the pocket. When you're backing straight out, that's when he's going to start to string together his combinations. But he does have a keen eye for people waiting to counter him, and I'm sure that's going to be the case with Kelvin Gastelum. He's going to be waiting for Kelvin to counter him. It's just going to be a matter of is he going to be able to avoid it for most of the fight before he lands a big shot, or is Kelvin going to be able to catch him on one of these occasions? So a couple of different times he got dropped in this fight. I'm just going to look at what happened there. So the first time would be right about here. So I'm actually going to slow this down to make it a little bit easier to see what happens. So here he just gets out of the pocket in exchange with Yoel. All right, they're back to reset. Yoel thought the kick was coming there, so he looked to defend it. So Whittaker throws one of those single shot kicks, but Romero does a good job of getting out of the way. So now his feet are planted. He's in the pocket. He's not able to move out. He has to rely on his head movement. So he kind of moves his head, going to shift his head over this way to avoid the first shot. Romero's waiting for it. And then lands the, I guess, like an overhand or right hook, and that's what drops him. So we see that again. That's a little too far back. See, in relying on his head movement, it helps him a lot to avoid the first shot. But as we were talking about with Gastelum, again, Gastelum, when he was looking to counter Bisping, wasn't looking to counter with one shot. It was the hook and then the cross. So he's kind of using the hook to bring him in. And I have a feeling that there might be a similar strategy in this fight too. All right, so he misses his shot. Now Yoel is ready to counter. Lead hook. Rear power shot. It's not exactly a straight cross, but it's the rear power shot that he kind of tries to get him to shift into, and does a perfect job right here and drops him. Now, it is worth noting, at least to be fair to Whittaker, at this point his hand's broken, so he's using the kicks a little bit more. Especially, this is his right hand too, and he's a right-handed fighter, so he may be using the kicks a little bit more at this point in the fight than he otherwise would had his right hand been okay. So we don't know if that's something that is specific to this Whittaker or specific to the Romero fight, or if this is something that we might see in the upcoming fight with Gastelum. The other time that he got dropped later on. All right, so let's get this exchange. So just gets out of the way there again. And there that's the game that Whittaker plays. It's pretty risky, where oftentimes you're really relying on your head movement. You don't have your hand there, so just in case you don't get away in time, you don't have anything to block. Gets away with it in this specific instance, but it's not going to work for him the entire time. So now they're going back to center. Leg kick. Now here he's off balance again. His footwork or his feet are completely out of alignment, out of whack. He's almost facing the completely wrong way. So Romero still in the pocket is going to take advantage of that. Throws one. We get the duck. Very good at avoiding the first shot, even if the hands are down. But now he's still in. Hands are down again. Doesn't realize that he's still in range, or Romero's still in range. Romero lunges in with a left. Bing, catches him, drops him. So to me, the way I see this fight going is if Whittaker does a good job of just keeping Kelvin at bay for a while, I think he can definitely take some rounds away as long as his hand doesn't break or doesn't have any serious injury. If this fight goes to a decision, you have to favor Whittaker. Do I think Kelvin can catch him? There's a real chance Kelvin can catch him. I think that at plus 200, he's fairly live. I would give the edge to Whittaker, but this is definitely a fight that could go either way. And you should be looking for Whittaker to be careful about getting counter because Kelvin's going to try to catch him.